Welcome to the Deep Dive.
Great to be here.
Today we're doing something a little different. We're plunging into a really fascinating moment in history.
Oh, yeah. Which one?
A rivalry from the Third Crusade between two figures, well, everyone's heard of them, Sultan Saladin and King Richard the Lionheart of England.
Ah, right. Saladin and Richard.
Yeah.
It's a clash that often gets painted in, very broad strokes, black and white.
Exactly. But the sources, they tell a far more complex and honestly surprising story.
Yeah, they really do.
Our source for this deep dive is drawn from excerpts of an article. It's called The Sword and the Heart, Saladin and Richard the Lionheart.
Okay.
And our mission basically is to peel back the layers of this relationship because it wasn't just, swords clashing.
No,
It was, kind of unexpectedly, a story of mutual respect, even honor, and moments of, real humanity right in the middle of some pretty brutal warfare.
That's the fascinating part, isn't it? We're going to dig into those surprising details the article pulls out, the ones that really challenge how we usually think about this time.
Okay, so let's get right into it. To really understand these two men, Saladin and Richard, and their dynamic, we kind of need to set the scene first.
Absolutely. Context is key. We're talking late 12th century.
Right. The Holy Land, specifically.
Yeah. And this place was just a crucible, really. Faith, politics, ambition, constant warfare, all mixed together.
And the backdrop looming over everything is the Crusades, these massive religious wars.
It's driven mostly by this intense desire, on the European side at least, to control Jerusalem. A city sacred to Christians, Muslims, and Jews, just a focal point for so much tension.
Definitely a hotbed. And out of all that, our two main players emerge. So first, Saladin.
Right. The article mentions he was born in 1137, Tikrit, which is modern Iraq.
And what's interesting, what the source points out, is he wasn't born into power, not royalty.
No, exactly. Humble origins. It highlights how he rose through the ranks, unified different Muslim groups under his banner, the Ayyubid dynasty.
And then the big one, 1187, he recaptures Jerusalem from Christian control.
Which was just a massive event, a shockwave across the Christian world. And it directly leads to the Third Crusade.
Which brings us to Richard III of England, the Lionheart.
The Lionheart, known for his, legendary courage, his military skill. He leads the Christian forces in this Third Crusade, 1189 to 1192.
And inevitably, their paths cross in a major way, on the battlefield.
Famously so.
Let's talk about that key clash the article mentions, the Battle of Arsuf, September 1191, near the coast.
Okay, Arsuf. The article describes Saladin's strategy here. It was classic Saladin, really. He didn't want a big set-piece battle right away.
No. What was the plan?
Well, constant harassment, hit-and-run tactics, trying to provoke the Crusaders, break their famous discipline, wear them down as they marched.
And Richard's response. The source emphasizes it wasn't just about charging in.
No, it was about control. Incredible discipline, keeping his troops in this super tight formation, even under relentless attack, resisting the urge to break ranks.
That sounds tough.
Extremely. But it worked. That discipline held. And when Richard finally gave the order, unleashed his knights.
It was decisive.
A very significant Christian victory with Arsuf. Yeah. A big tactical win for Richard. Showed his leadership quality.
And the article is clear on this, Arsuf wasn't the end of the war, not by a long shot.
No, definitely not. The fighting continued, and both leaders, they faced huge challenges afterwards.
Like what?
Well, for Saladin, even though he lost that battle, the bigger headache was probably holding his coalition together. All these different Muslim factions he'd united. Keeping them unified was a constant struggle.
Okay, so internal pressures. And Richard?
Richard had his own problems piling up. Resources dwindling, supplies running low, and maybe more importantly, serious political trouble brewing back in England. He needed to get back.
Right, so intense conflict, personal challenges for both.
Exactly. And it's right in the middle of all that. Yeah. That the article reveals something, pretty remarkable.
This is the bit that really jumped out at me from the source. It's 1192. Truce negotiations are actually happening, believe it or not.
Yeah, talks were on and off.
And Richard falls ill. Seriously ill. A fever.
And Saladin hears about this. His main rival, the leader of the Crusade, is sick.
And what does he do? Something completely unexpected. Astonishing, really, given they were still technically at war.
He sends his personal physician, his own doctor, to treat Richard.
I mean, just think about that. Sending your doctor to the enemy commander.
And not just the doctor, the article gets specific. He sends fresh fruit, peaches, pears.
Oh, wow.
And get this, specifically cooled with snow, brought down from Mount Hermon. That detail, the effort involved,
Yeah.
it's incredible.
During active warfare, it's just hard to wrap your head around.
It's an extraordinary act of chivalry, isn't it?
Yeah.
And the source points out that people at the time recorded this. Saladin's own secretary, Baha ad-Din ibn Shaddad.
He wrote about Saladin's thinking behind it.
Yes. According to Ibn Shaddad, Saladin basically said something like, "A king does not kill a king, and honor binds us even in war."
Honor binds us even in war. That's powerful. That really sums up the principle.
It really does. And Richard didn't just ignore this gesture.
No, the source shows he was genuinely affected by it, and he reciprocated.
How so?
Well, it recounts this other incident. During some fighting, Saladin's horse gets killed under him.
A bad situation for a commander.
Right. So what does Richard do? He sends Saladin a replacement, a magnificent war horse, a gift.
Wow. So acknowledging Saladin's status, his valor, even as an enemy.
Exactly. And these specific moments, the article stresses, are so striking because the general context was, well, it was brutal.
Oh, absolutely. The Crusades were notoriously violent. Atrocities happened on both sides, no question.
So these acts of mutual respect, they really stand out against that dark backdrop, like little glimmers of something else.
And this whole dynamic, the fighting, the respect, it all leads eventually to a resolution of sorts.
The Treaty of Jaffa, 1192.
Yeah. And the terms were basically a compromise, weren't they?
Yeah. Christian pilgrims allowed safe passage to Jerusalem, visit the holy sites.
But the city itself stayed under Muslim control. Saladin kept Jerusalem.
So as the article points out, neither leader really got everything they wanted initially. Richard didn't conquer Jerusalem. Saladin didn't manage to kick the Crusaders out entirely.
But both of them, the source suggests, came out of it with a lot of admiration for how they conducted themselves during the war, especially during those difficult negotiations.
And here's maybe the most interesting twist the article explores.
Go on.
Despite being enemies, locked in this huge conflict, Saladin and Richard, in some fundamental ways, were maybe more alike than they were different.
You mean similar?
Well, the source paints this picture of two men driven by kind of parallel forces. Deep religious faith, obviously.
It's central for both.
A powerful sense of duty to their people, their cause, and let's be honest, a desire for glory, for honor. That was huge back then.
Yeah, reputation mattered immensely. The article describes Saladin as, a devout Sunni Muslim, known for his piety, but also for his mercy.
Especially the mercy shown in Jerusalem in 87, right? Compared to how sieges often ended.
Exactly, a contrast. And Richard, he's the devout Christian warrior king stereotype in some ways, but the article suggests he genuinely recognized and respected Saladin's integrity, his leadership qualities.
So their mutual respect, even across that huge religious and political chasm.
It kind of reveals something universal, doesn't it? That even in the worst conflicts, humanity, shared values, they can still emerge.
The article also touches on something interesting, how their backgrounds might have shaped them differently.
Oh yeah, like Saladin's origins.
Right. It suggests that maybe his more humble start, being a Kurd from Tikrit, not born to rule, maybe that gave him a kind of empathy, especially for ordinary people, and that maybe influenced his focus on justice.
Interesting idea. And Richard?
Richard, born at the top, steeped in that European culture of chivalry, warfare, that was his world. But maybe, the source hints, encountering Saladin, a leader operating under a different code but showing similar virtues like honor, maybe that broadened Richard's own perspective a bit.
So different paths, but they sort of converged on this shared value of honor, even in an enemy.
Something like that, yeah. It's fascinating to think about. What about their legacies then?
Well, Saladin died pretty soon after the Crusade ended, 1193. And he left behind this enduring reputation, compassion, justice. He's still revered in the Muslim world and even respected in the West.
And Richard, he eventually got back to Europe, but then faced years of captivity in Austria.
Right, captured on his way home.
And later died fighting in France in 1199. A very different end.
But their story, specifically those interactions we've been talking about, that part has lived on. It's almost become mythic. An example of chivalry, honorable conduct between enemies in a really brutal age.
And it's crucial, as the article points out, this isn't just romantic legend. There's historical backing.
Definitely. Contemporary writers, chroniclers, they recorded this stuff. Ibn Shaddad, who we mentioned, Saladin's secretary.
And on the Christian side?
The Itinerarium Peregrinorum et Gesta Regis Ricardi, basically. The journey of the pilgrims and deeds of King Richard. It records events from the Crusader perspective, including some of these interactions.
Well, it's archaeological evidence, right? Inscriptions, artifacts from the time. They help confirm the general setting and the key players.
Yeah, it grounds the story in reality. So, okay, we've gone through the narrative, the respect, the outcome. What are the big takeaways here? What does the source really want us to get from this rivalry?
Well, for me, maybe the biggest thing is that idea of honor transcending conflict. I mean, these guys were fighting over Jerusalem. The stakes couldn't be higher.
Right.
Yet they found moments, specific actions to treat each other with respect, even kindness. It just forces you to think, doesn't it? You can be opponents, fierce opponents, without totally dehumanizing the other side.
Seeing the humanity,
Yeah.
even in your enemy.
Yeah, that seems possible based on their example.
And what about leadership? That sending of the physician, the horse. It wasn't just, being nice.
No, it feels like more than that.
It reflects a certain kind of leadership, maybe. One that understands empathy, respect, even for an adversary. It wasn't just about power through force, but also demonstrating a code, conduct.
That makes sense. And both of them, remember, had their own internal struggles, keeping their coalitions together.
Yeah, that was constant pressure.
So their ability to actually negotiate, to find some common ground, even if it meant compromising, it speaks to how hard but how important finding unity is, even within your own side.
And the final treaty, the Treaty of Jaffa itself, it wasn't a total win for anyone.
No, definitely a compromise.
Which is maybe a lesson in itself.
Yeah.
Humility. Recognizing you can't always get everything. The value of compromise in these really tangled, long-running conflicts.
The article also seems keen to sort of push back against some common myths or overly simple ideas about the Crusades.
Oh, for sure. Like the idea that it was purely about religion. To Christians versus Muslims over faith.
Right. The source makes it clear, yeah, faith was huge, but politics, economics, power, complex alliances, they were all deeply mixed in. It wasn't just one thing.
Alliances weren't always strictly religious either. It was messy.
And the popular image of Saladin and Richard as just fanatics, driven only by religious dogma.
The historical accounts the article uses suggest something different. More pragmatism. That capacity for mutual respect we talked about. It contradicts the simple fanatic label.
They were driven by faith and duty, yes, but they were also smart, calculating leaders dealing with a very complex reality.
And definitely pushing back against any black and white view of the Crusades. Good guys versus bad guys.
Absolutely not. The sources are clear. Bad things were done by both sides. Atrocities happened. And alliances shifted, crossed religious lines. It was far more complex and, frankly, more human than those simple narratives allow.
A much messier picture.
So we've really taken a deep dive here into Saladin and Richard, gone past that simple enemies label to explore the surprising connection, forged through honor, respect, unexpected humanity.
It really is something, isn't it? To think how those moments, those specific acts of compassion, could exist right alongside the incredible brutality and chaos of that whole era. It does make you reconsider things.
So for you listening, what really stands out from their story? Is it that famous exchange of gifts? The doctor, the horse?
Or maybe the strategic chess match. Arsuf, Richard's discipline, Saladin's tactics.
Or is it just that powerful underlying idea that even the bitterest of enemies can somehow find common ground, find shared values like honor?
Yeah. Their story kind of hangs in the air, doesn't it? And it leads us to the final thought, maybe.
What's that?
Well, thinking about the conflicts and divisions we see all around us today, where can we find, or maybe how can we cultivate, those kinds of unexpected moments of mutual respect? And what practical lessons about leadership, about seeing the humanity in others, even across huge divides? What can these two figures, Saladin and Richard, dead for over 800 years, still teach us right now?